Hello everyone, Irish Warlock here. Today we are going to tackle a question that has reared its head within the gaming community time and time again. What exactly is an RPG? RPGs, or role-playing games, are an iconic genre within the world of video games, and have been so for many years. Many of the best games to come out have been RPGs, but RPGs trace their roots back a lot further than the original video games. Video game RPGs obviously took their inspiration from the tabletop RPG world, with games like Dungeons & Dragons, Cyberpunk and Vampire the Masquerade inspiring games based within their franchises, or games in completely original franchises but built off of their system. However, in recent years, the concept of what even is a video game RPG has been brought into question every time a major game launches that brands itself as an RPG. And it actually feels like that every game that comes out is an RPG in some way or another, using systems and mechanics which in the past belonged to RPGs only, like leveling systems or character customization. This, however, has led to many people claiming that there is an oversaturation of RPG elements within gaming, and that true RPGs just don't exist anymore. And when you look at the announcement or any trailers or videos for any major RPG, you just need to go into the comments of those videos or look at the social media posts or head over to Reddit and see that it is full of people saying, this game isn't a true RPG, this game looks okay but it sucks that they got rid of the RPG elements, etc, etc, etc. And of course, with all the recent news surrounding Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, these comments have been coming up time and time again, which is what inspired me to create this video. Because when I try to think of what an RPG needs to be considered an RPG, I have trouble finding what is missing from Bloodlines 2 and other RPGs where these comments have come up. So what qualifies a game to be an RPG? At what point does an action-adventure game transition into an action-adventure game with RPG elements, to eventually becoming a full RPG? Well, after a lot of research of chatting with people in the comments of videos, talking with some friends, and delving into the holy grails of online knowledge, I've been able to identify a few key factors that most people seem to agree that an RPG needs. We have character creation, developing your character through experience, levels and skills, a detailed story and setting, your ability to interact with the game, both from a story and a gameplay perspective, and your ability to explore and interact with the world. So starting off, we have character creation. Character creation is pretty simple. It's where most RPGs start, whether they are TTRPGs or video game RPGs. You sit down and decide who your character is, what they look like, what's their stats, what's their backstory, and possibly how they're going to play if you need to pick a class. Or that's how it is in a tabletop RPG. Because in video games, character creation is affected by one simple factor that is completely outside of the player's control. Is your character a blank slate, or are you working off something that was already there? A blank slate is a character where you create everything. It is purely your choice. There was nothing before, or if there was, it would be incredibly small, almost irrelevant. A good example of these games includes Baldur's Gate 3, Skyrim and Bloodlines 1. And to a lesser extent Dragon Age Origins, as the Warden is a bit of a blank slate, but they do have a backstory that is both important and relevant at specific times. The problem with this type of character creation is that it can come across as quite bland as the game progresses, especially if the character lacks a distinct voice. After a while of watching your character treat every interaction with a blank stare or an over-the-top facial expression just to get their feelings across, it can become quite tiresome and even immersion breaking. Despite this small shortcoming, however, many people advocate that a pure blank slate character creator is the only way an RPG can work. Supposedly this is a failing of Bloodlines 2, as the new character, Fire, isn't a blank slate, and this is a drawback for a lot of people. But is it really? This brings us to the second type of character creation, what I'm going to call template characters. Template characters are the pre-created characters that you can mold to a certain extent, whether that's their stats, their class, or their appearance. A good example of the template character would be Commander Shepard from Mass Effect. Yes, you can determine multiple parts of Shepard's backstory, choose their class, and customize their appearance, but in the end, all Commander Shepards are the same. Yeah, there may be a lot separating your Shepard from mine, but in the end, they are still Commander Shepard. At the far end of the scale for template characters, we have Geralt of Rivia from the Witcher franchise, who, as far as customization goes, has very little. Pretty much just hair and beard style in The Witcher 3, and that's about it. Now, obviously, this is because Geralt as a character existed long before the first game was released, about 17 or so years. So obviously, we couldn't really customize him that much. But here we have our first big contradiction of what seems to be a requirement for some people, because the original Mass Effect trilogy and the Witcher trilogy, specifically The Witcher 3, are considered some of the best RPGs of the modern era of gaming. For these games, thousands of players have put in countless hours, and I think those player characters have helped solidify that legacy. Would the Mass Effect trilogy be as successful if Commander Shepard was a blank slate like the Warden from Dragon Age Origins? I love Dragon Age Origins and the Warden, but there is a reason that BioWare decided to move away from the blank slate character, because I think, depending on the story being told, that the template character works better. I think it makes it easier to invest yourself into the character, the story, and the world when the player character already has a role and a relationship with that world before you even start the game, and you are seeing that role and that relationship evolve as the story progresses. However, and spoiler because this point is going to come up a lot, I also really think it depends on the game you're playing and the story being told. Skyrim works perfectly because the Dragonborn is a blank slate, and Mass Effect definitely wouldn't work without Commander Shepard. Probably one of the biggest defining features of an RPG is growing your character as the game progresses. They may look and sound the same at the end of the game, but they definitely will be very different. Taking your character from zero to hero, going from a weakling scared of giant rats to going one-on-one with a dragon, from being a nobody to being a household name known across the world. That is the fantasy that an RPG offers its players. Now, this advancement from a weak nobody to an all-powerful badass can be implemented into your game in several ways. We have the classic experience bar, where you gain experience from completing quests and killing enemies, and then when the bar is full, you level up. From there, you can improve your skills or unlock abilities. Most RPGs will follow this method. But we also have the training method. This is where you might still have an experience bar, however, instead of gaining experience from completing quests, your specific skills improve as you use them. And as these skills increase, they contribute to the experience bar increasing, leading to you leveling up. Skyrim is a good example of this. You focus on your archery and your archery skill goes up. If you want to get better at lockpicking, then you need to do some actual lockpicking. The final method is from Bloodlines 1, and this is where you gain experience by completing quests, and then you spend those points on improving specific skills, and you may need to spend multiple skill points to improve a single skill. Now, regardless of which leveling system a game chooses to implement, it's all irrelevant. The point is that one is included, but many people don't believe that. Some people believe that without something like what you're looking at now, you're not playing an RPG, and I don't agree with that. I see no difference between this and this, or this, or even this. Some people think that you need a skill sheet that has specific numbers that you increase, and that each increase has to have a specific in-game effect. My lockpicking skills have gone up by 1, and now the more difficult doors can be unlocked. But that's not the point. The point is to improve your character so that they are stronger at the end of the game than they were at the start. That's the end goal. Of course, you can have your opinions on which is better. I do prefer a game that has a mixture of stats to increase and skills to unlock. My favourite leveling system is the one from Dragon Age Origins, a mixture of stats to increase, skills that allow you to pick pockets, craft potions or persuade people, and abilities that you can use in combat. I really love this one, even if the ability trees are kinda basic in their design and layout. But again, as long as your character is stronger at the end of the game than they were at the start, then the requirement has been met. Outside of your character, many people will also say that an RPG needs a good story with interesting characters alongside deep and intriguing lore. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of good RPGs out there that have really good stories, and a lot of people love them for their stories. I myself love losing myself in these worlds where I can learn a lot of new and interesting things. And that's the problem when you make a good story, interesting characters, or intriguing lore necessity, because it's all based on the player's opinions. I love The Witcher 3's story, I think it's one of the best out there, but others might say they hate it. I think the companions in Dragon Age 2 are absolutely brilliant, while someone else might say they find them boring. While the first 2 points can be backed up with facts and evidence of what the game has on offer, this point is all about personal perspective. What's not a personal perspective when it comes to the game's story and world is your character's ability to interact with it. This is both from a narrative standpoint, like influencing the outcome or affecting the opinions and fates of the characters you will meet, but also from a gameplay perspective, i.e., how many different ways can you play the game. This might be one of the biggest factors that an RPG requires, as it's kind of one of the biggest selling points of a TTRPG. A game of Dungeons & Dragons is influenced and driven as much by the players as it is by the Dungeon Master. Some might even argue that the players have a bigger influence than the DM. The actions, inactions, and dice rolls of the players can change a game of D&D in a way that the DM could never have expected. And most video game RPGs do allow this in some way or another. But this point gets brought into question when the scale of your ability to interact with the story and the world, and how much influence you have, is brought into question. From a story perspective, Skyrim would be quite low on this tier. Outside of a few smaller choices like whether a few characters live or die, or who to side with in the Civil War, the game continues on and ends pretty much the same for everyone. You kill Alduin and you save the world. Where it does excel, however, is how you choose to play the game, what playstyle you adopt if you keep it up for the full playthrough, and how your actions can change the mundane of the world. Kill a merchant and then their store will become unavailable, or someone else will take it over. Bethesda games tend to do this part really well. On the other hand, we have The Witcher 3, which has 3 distinct main quest endings and a bunch of different endings for both side quests and for NPCs. But there's no real way to play the game differently than someone else. You might focus more on using poisons while someone else will focus more on using bombs, but in the end, Geralt plays the same for everyone. For me, I think this is one of the most important things that an RPG needs to have. The ability to replay the game in a completely different way, whether that's your gameplay style, like picking a different class, or in the story choices that you will make as the game progresses, and getting a different ending whether in a major or a minor way. The final point that I'm going to raise here is the ability to explore the world, to set off and do your own thing. Is this game open world? I've seen this one pop up a lot, and I think it's because it's linked to the idea of pure freedom that a TTRPG can offer. Of course, not all TTRPGs are like this, but there is an idea that in a TTRPG you can explore anywhere or talk to anyone, that you can just go anywhere and find your own adventure, and a lot of video game RPGs offer this. Kingdom Come Deliverance, every Elder Scrolls and Fallout game, The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077. These are just a few of the games that allow you to explore most, if not all, of the world right from the get-go, and interact with most, if not all, of their NPCs. I do get the idea of having a fully interactive world. A big draw of an RPG is the immersion factor, and that can be done really well when the game is an open world. But is it required? Well, if it is a requirement, then the Dragon Age franchise, the Mass Effect franchise, Baldur's Gate 3, Bloodlines 1 and many more fail in this regard. Because in those games you cannot just walk from one part of the game to another. These games do offer a lot of exploration, they're just not open world. You have areas you can travel to on your journey. Some of these areas you can only visit once for very specific quests. Certain areas offer both main and side quests that you can explore as much as you want, and then there are hub worlds that you can explore and customize. I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, but once again, neither of these options is better than the other, but rather they are better based on the type of story the developers are trying to tell and the type of game you want to experience. An Elder Scrolls game would not work without an open world, and Baldur's Gate 3 wouldn't work within one. So now that all of these points are discussed, let's answer our question from the very start of this video. Is Bloodlines 2 an RPG? Well, it's obviously kind of hard to address all of these points as the game hasn't come out yet. Thankfully, however, from the Chinese room and a few different media sources, we do have a good bit of information on the game already, so we can take a good guess at it.
Am I interrupting?
Starting off with character customization, Bloodlines 2 is taking the template approach with the players playing as Fire. Fire has their own backstory and their reputation is both established and well known to the vampires of the world.
I think
Fire isn't fully customizable, however, like Commander Shepard. A lot of people have seen this as a negative, and I do kind of agree with it. I would have preferred if we had a greater level of control over Fire's appearance. However, we will get to choose Fire's gender, hairstyle and colour, eye colour, makeup, piercings and vampiric clan. Character customization wise, Fire falls somewhere between Commander Shepard and Geralt of Rivia. A pre-created character with their own backstory and way of speaking, but with the option to modify their appearance and gameplay style to a certain extent. But what about developing and growing Fire? Can they gain experience, level up, learn new skills? Yes they can. We've seen what the skill tree looks like and it is kind of basic. There is a lot to learn based off the different vampiric clans, I just wish there was more detail, maybe multiple paths going through it, but it is what it is. As I said, the method of how to improve the player character doesn't really matter, that's more player preference. What matters is that Fire improves and grows stronger as the game progresses. Now obviously we can't answer the question on a detailed story and developed lore. Vampire the Masquerade has its own deep lore, so it's probably safe to say that it will be present in Bloodlines 2. We just won't really know until we get our hands on the game. But what about our ability to interact and influence this unknown story? We do know that Bloodlines 2 will have multiple endings, and the Chinese room even delayed the game earlier this year so they could add more endings, with the ending you get being determined by the player's choices throughout the game, the clan you belong to, and interactions with NPCs. So if that is to be taken at face value, then yes, there will be a lot of control over the narrative of Bloodlines 2. From a gameplay perspective, we do know that your choice of clan and the clothes you wear greatly affect your gameplay. You get unique abilities, dialogue options and reactions from NPCs depending on what you wear and what clan you're from. And we do know that the different ways the NPCs will react to you do pop up on screen, so you can see the different ways you are influencing these characters and the story. And we know that these reactions are important as your reputation is based on the interactions you have with these individuals, rather than your relationships with the different factions. This means that characters within the same faction can have different opinions of you. Finally, is Bloodlines 2 an open world? Yes it is. Bloodlines 2 takes place in Seattle and is spread across 5 different districts. Uptown, Downtown, the Financial District, Chinatown and an Industrial District. And even though it is divided into 5 districts, it is a single open world with no loading screens when you move between them. It does take a while for this open world to open up to you. The devs have confirmed that you need to hit a certain story beat before you can truly go anywhere without it being an issue for the NPCs. And if that's an issue for you, then fine, I do get that. But there are a lot of open world games out there that have a mechanic like this in place. The Witcher 3 is a prime example of this, so you have to take an issue with that game and others if you have an issue with Bloodlines 2. Now, can you interact with everything and everyone you see in the world? No, you cannot. Eurogamer confirmed this after getting a hands-on look at a game demo, and were disappointed that you couldn't go into every building and talk to every person. But I have to ask, were they expecting that? Were you? Because I certainly wasn't. You can't go into every building and talk to every NPC in Cyberpunk, or Baldur's Gate 3 or The Witcher 3. So why did you expect it here? And would you even want it? You can do that in an Elder Scrolls game, sure, but how many buildings and NPCs are relevant in those games? Also, Bethesda games can do this because most of their maps are wilderness. It doesn't really work in a city/urban map. Also, we couldn't enter every building or speak to every NPC in Bloodlines 1, and it suited that game just fine. It suited the story that was being told, and it will probably suit the story being told in Bloodlines 2. Why I think this is being brought up is I think it's now more noticeable. Playing in a fully open world game with today's level of technology makes the invisible walls a lot more noticeable. However, this doesn't bother me in Cyberpunk 2077 or other games, so it probably won't bother me here. But will we be able to interact with the world in unique ways? Well, we know we have the clan system that offers a lot of different ways of playing, but we also have other stuff as well. We know that we'll be able to use our actions and abilities, dialogue, and clothing to affect a person's blood in different ways. Then, once you drink that blood, fire will receive a unique buff depending on how you affected the blood. So, this is a good example of a small way you can affect the gameplay of Bloodlines 2. For some bonus points, I've also seen people judge the gameplay/combat as to why Bloodlines 2 feels less like an RPG. People have said that the differences between Bloodlines 2 and Bloodlines 1, the fact that you can't carry a massive arsenal of weapons, and that it's nothing like the TTRPG are all negatives to Bloodlines 2 and to why it's not an RPG. To which I have multiple responses. Regarding Bloodlines 2 not being like Bloodlines 1, well, Bloodlines 1 came out 20 years ago, and gaming and the level of tech that we have has grown a lot since then. If we have the tech we have now 20 years ago, Bloodlines 1 would probably look and play like Bloodlines 2. Knights of the Old Republic would probably play like Jedi Survivor, and Morrowind would play like Skyrim. Okay, that's a bad example of evolving gameplay, but you get the idea. The types of games that are being made are influenced by a number of categories, including what the developers want to make, what the market requires, what shareholders, producers, and higher ups within the company want to make, but also by the level of tech that is available. I do understand people bringing up not being able to carry a bunch of melee and ranged weapons in Bloodlines 2. One of the brilliant things about Bloodlines 1 was a great variety of weapons, but I don't really care about this all that much, because it does seem we will not be lacking in the combat department when it comes to Bloodlines 2. The hand-to-hand combat looks sick. Being able to send enemies flying with a single punch or ripping off someone's head and then throwing it at someone else is just badass. And then we have all the cool vampiric abilities, like causing enemies to fight on your side or throwing blood daggers or freezing time. I don't think Bloodlines 2 needs a wide arsenal of guns or melee weapons, because why would you want to use them when you have all these cool vampiric abilities and you're so much stronger than the regular humans of the world? Some people have also brought up that Bloodlines 2 has moved away from a choice-driven RPG to a more linear one, focused on action, and that there is a simplification of the game's progression system. And yeah, I do kind of agree with that. The simplification of skills and a more linear approach to storytelling is found in a variety of video games that are adapted from a TTRPG, including Bloodlines 1. But I do think it has been taken a lot further than it has been in the past. And I do think that a lot of people who are saying this have not played the game yet and have only just seen what the rest of us have seen, or they have been able to play the game, but they've only been able to play the opening sections. Now, maybe they are right. I will admit to that there is a good chance they could be right. Maybe there will be a loss of player choice in Bloodlines 2, but we don't really know yet, and we won't know until the game actually comes out. Finally, with people saying that Bloodlines 2 is nothing like the current version of the TTRPG, I have nothing really to say on that because I haven't played Bloodlines 2 yet, obviously, and I've never played the TTRPG, unfortunately. So maybe it has. Maybe it is very, very different from Bloodlines 2. But is that an issue? There are pretty big differences between Bloodlines 1 and the version of the TTRPG it is based off of, and there are big differences between Cyberpunk 2077 and its TTRPG equivalent, Cyberpunk Red. Trying to adapt the rules of a TTRPG to a modern video game is quite difficult, and some concessions have to be made to make not only the video game playable, but also just appeal to a wider audience. Now, what I'm going to say here may sound controversial, but Baldur's Gate 3 is a bad D&D analog. Now wait, hear me out. From a rules perspective, Baldur's Gate 3 captures D&D pretty well, with some minor changes here and there for balancing. But from a storytelling approach, it's nothing like a game of D&D. It's very linear, you're required to hit certain story beats at specific moments, and you cannot progress any further until you resolve those story beats. And some of those story beats end the same way no matter what, like Answer the Dragon not being able to live. There's nothing wrong with any of this, it's just one of the necessary sacrifices of moving a TTRPG into a video game setting. You do have a party, but you are the party's leader, making all of the decisions, and you're kinda like a chosen one. These might be things found in a D&D game, but they're not normal for the average D&D game. Most D&D games tend to avoid these. Also, I do think Baldur's Gate 3 has a much higher focus on combat than the average game of D&D. Maybe your game is different than mine and other people's, but obviously, once again, it's a video game. It's meant to have a higher rate of combat so it can appeal to a wider audience and be enjoyable as the game progresses. If you only had one combat encounter every couple of hours in the game, it would get kinda dull after a while. So yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 captures the rules of D&D pretty well, it captures the spirit of the game brilliantly, but it's very different from an actual game. So why can't Bloodlines 2 be like that? Why does it exactly need to be like its TTRPG? Why can't it just capture the essence of the game, but play very, very differently? The final point I'm going to mention, and it's going to be really quick before I get back to talking about the main 5 categories. A lot of people say this game would be better if it wasn't called Bloodlines 2, if it was just called Vampire the Masquerade, something else. To which I say, if it wasn't called Bloodlines 2, all the people complaining would probably give out that it's not called Bloodlines 2. I think that's a stupid argument. But getting back to the main point here, judging by these 5 factors, Bloodlines 2 meets the general requirements to be considered an RPG. However, the views of those who have played the early portions of the game seem to be a bit divided. But for myself, I think that Bloodlines 2 is an RPG. I don't think you could argue otherwise. It's just one that's more in line with modern gaming, and I think that's the issue. People have been waiting for Bloodlines 2 for a very long time, and because of that, people have set a lot of expectations, and I just don't think people are going to get those expectations met. I get that people would have wanted a more classic RPG, to play as a completely original character like in Bloodlines 1, to have a stats page or more detailed skill tree, but as I've mentioned repeatedly in this video, that's all irrelevant. That's all the method by which something is being implemented. It's all a preference for the specific details, not requirements for defining something as an RPG. And defining an RPG is very, very hard. Most video game genres are very easy to define. We know what a real-time strategy is, we know what an FPS is, we know what a dating sim is. But RPGs are so nuanced when compared to other video game genres. Games that don't advertise themselves as RPGs but still meet a lot, if not all, of the previously mentioned criteria, can still be RPGs. Games like Stardew Valley, Pokemon, Breath of the Wild don't advertise themselves as RPGs, but I think they are. Take a look at Grand Theft Auto 5. By the previously mentioned points, it should be an RPG. You have a certain degree of character customization, it's an open world with an interesting story and characters, you gather new, better weapons as the game progresses, and have stats that improve as you play the game. By all accounts, it should be an RPG. But is it? I don't think it is. To me, it doesn't feel like an RPG. But what about Red Dead Redemption 2? Like GTA 5, it meets all of the categories, and it meets them in pretty much the same way, if not better. So it should be a no, right? It's not an RPG. To me, Red Dead Redemption 2 is definitely an RPG. Now the honor mechanic, which does affect both gameplay and the game's ending, definitely helps with that, but I think it's something more. RPGs are as much a genre of video games as they are a playstyle chosen by the players. Think of a game of Dungeons and Dragons for a second. Imagine a game where you've created your character, chosen the race, class, stats and equipment. You created an orc fighter, but you've given them no backstory, no goals, no personality, not even a name. And everyone else in your group has created their characters in the exact same way. And when you start the game, you're not in a tavern, you're not arriving in a new city. Instead, you start outside the dungeon. The entire game is going through the dungeon room by room. You fight monsters, you solve puzzles, you get by traps. And that's it. There's no NPCs to meet, no lore to learn, no story to follow. Your game is just one big dungeon crawl that will end with either you completing the dungeon or the entire party getting wiped out. And that's a totally valid way to play. Some people really like playing D&D this way. But without a story to follow, worlds to explore, and most importantly, a character to immerse yourself into, you're not really playing an RPG. You're playing a dungeon crawl simulator with the D&D rules. And video game RPGs are the exact same. You can play an RPG and not treat it like an RPG. Race through the dialogue and skip all the cutscenes so you can get back to the gameplay. Don't focus on your choices, just pick whichever is given to you first. Don't interact with the NPCs, and let the game auto level you up. All of this might not be the correct way to play the game as it was intended, but that doesn't invalidate it as a type of gameplay style. I imagine many of us who love RPGs now played our first ones when we were very young, barely knew what we were doing, and didn't even care. And there are probably people now, all grown up, who play those games the exact same way. What I'm saying here is for you to play a game as an RPG, you have to put in the effort. The choice is as much yours as it is the developers. The developers can put in a character creator, a leveling system, create a deep and interesting story that you can influence, and give you a massive world to explore with a ton of lore to learn. The developers definitely have a lot more work to do, most of it actually, but we the players have to be willing to put in some effort. We have to be willing to lose ourselves in that world and in that game. We have to fully immerse ourselves into that story and into the character, because that's how an RPG works. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I hope you liked that video, and if you did, do give it a like and a comment because it'd be greatly appreciated. You can check out similar videos as well on the channel, and of course you can subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all content going forward, and check me out on TikTok and on Medium as well. And I'll see you next time.